Chapter 5 Never, Ever, and Forever. The following morning, Chomper introduced Nancy and Jonathan to Trudy and Rodney. The older couple shook hands and exchanged proper hellos. "It's an honor to meet you. To meet you is an honor," Trudy said. "The day is young, but there is much to do before we leave." "Yes, Chomper, you come with me. Ruby and her parents will spend time with Nancy," Jonathan said, heading away from the group. Okay. See you later, Ruby." Later." That day, Nancy had her work cut out for her, helping the fast runners make their arrowheads, along with keeping the weapons sharp and ready for action. Setting up a target, Ruby and her parents practiced and were determined to hit the center, as Nancy had demonstrated. All the while, Nancy was there to help them, pointing out how to hold the weapons and what best technique to use for the perfect shot. Ruby was the fastest to learn, hitting the center within a few hours and moving on to the next one, the spear. Nancy told the three that particular one required up-close combat, meaning they needed to mask their scent. Using a mix of mud and woven stinkweed to cover their scent, the three were able to move without a predator detecting them. Compared to what the fast runners were up to, Chomper and Jonathan meditated by a waterfall, Jonathan telling Chomper he needed to clear his mind before they moved on to the next set of his abilities. They sat and took a steady, deep breath, Chomper struggling to keep his mind from racing on how to protect their child, how to be a good alpha, and earn the respect of other Sharptooth. "Calm yet?" "Not really, but I'm trying." "What troubles you?" "The child, me failing as an alpha. The other Sharptooth would never see me as their leader," Chomper admitted. "It's hard, Dad. I don't know how to be a leader. Ruby would make a better alpha than me. Actually, I wish she were the alpha instead of I." Jonathan patted Chomper's shoulder. "Don't worry. Being a ruler doesn't happen overnight. It'll take time, but you'll find a way to gain their trust." Before either of them knew it, a spear flew out and landed between them. Chomper gasped and hid behind Jonathan, who simply looked up and shook his head. "Dearest, don't you believe that's a bit risky?" "Nonsense. Ruby needs to be ready to protect our grandchild. Maybe instead of napping, you might help our son," Nancy's voice said from within the brush. "We were meditating." "She's right. Come, I'll give you some advice on fighting." Unlike Ruby, Chomper wasn't much for conflict and avoided it as best he could. However, with the idea of a young one on the way, he braced up and listened to Jonathan's advice. "Now, most believe you must be strong to beat an enemy. However, this is not the case, as one may learn ways to use their opponent's energy against them. I'm of course referring to self-defense." "Self-defense? Never heard of it." "Should someone grab you, you can learn techniques to slip out of their grasp and flee." "Really? There are other ways of fighting?" Chomper asked, never told of such things before. "Yes, now watch and learn." Chomper appreciated Screech and Thud, but having his father teach him a new way of moving and new ideas was exciting and refreshing compared to all he'd been told growing up. It was interesting to see Screech and Thud try to attack Jonathan, who managed to keep the pair from laying a single claw on him. The way Jonathan moved was graceful, speedy, and took the pair of fast biters by surprise. In fact, Screech tried to really go for it and leapt at Jonathan with full intention to tackle him. In a flash, Jonathan shapeshifted into a large Sharptooth and Screech crashed into the taller male, being knocked back. All the while, Thud only stood aside to avoid being struck by Screech's body that landed beside him. "I think I'm calling it," Thud admitted, having more brains than pride. "Right. So, think you're ready to try it?" Chomper sparred with Jonathan, who took it slow, allowing Chomper to get used to shapeshifting quickly before attacking. During their time together, Ruby, Chomper, and her parents felt they'd learned more in a few days than they had their entire lives. In the early afternoon, when Ruby and her parents were practicing with Screech and Thud, Chomper was with his parents on the spaceship, looking over his injured leg. They took x-rays of his leg, trying to determine why it still bothered him. Chomper waited while Nancy looked through a hologram screen, making notes and reading it with a careful gaze. Setting the clipboard aside, she stood and looked at his leg. Then she did something weird, hummed before she sang. Flower, gleam and glow, let your power shine. Save what has been lost, bring back what once was mine. What once was mine. For a moment, Chomper said nothing, looking from Nancy to his leg, expecting something to happen. What was that for? Oh, we have the gift to heal. So you can bring someone back from death? No, the healing must be done before the time of death. When nothing happened, she smacked her lips, going through the same process as though expecting a different result. When the hologram beeped, she shook her head. So, am I okay? Or was this left over from the fight to save your friends? Yeah, there was a set of teeth that got lodged into my flesh. I thought once they were removed, I'd recover back to myself. Yet it hurts to walk, bothers me on a regular basis. That's because it was broken and not set properly, so it couldn't heal, couldn't recover fully. I see here where it is broken. How could I not have known? It's not uncommon, son. What do I do to fix it? Jonathan and Nancy shared a worried look. You could re-break it and mend it, though you'll have to stay off of it for many days. Many days, possibly weeks. Chomper was thoughtful. That means Ruby and her family would have to bring me food. Days upon days of relying on Ruby and her family seemed like a good deal to put on them, especially with the egg about to hatch. Back in the Great Valley, they had their friends to help, but on the mysterious island, they were limited. What if I don't do anything? Over time, it will hurt more and more. Eventually, you might not be able to stand on it at all. The best thing to do is keep moving despite the pain. All right, that I can do. He got up and felt the weight hurt his leg, yet managed to keep upright. As far as anyone is concerned, I'm fine. Especially Ruby. I don't want her to have to worry about me. She'll be busy enough with the child. She doesn't need one more thing. I'm sorry, son, that we couldn't do anything. Funny, with all this advanced technology, some things still take time. Nancy went and rubbed his face. Will you be okay? Yeah, knowing what my fate is makes me appreciate the time I have and the ones I love. Bending over, he embraced her. I love you, Mom. Nancy gave a sniff. I love you too, my son. Group hug! Jonathan joined in, nuzzling close to Nancy and Chomper. Nothing like being close with my wife and child. That reminds me, what does wife mean? You called Ruby that the day you met her. Where we're from, Jonathan and I are considered a husband and wife, a married couple. It's like being mates, only before we're intimate, we share a wedding ceremony with our families to witness our union. We exchange vows, and we're blessed as husband and wife, till death do us part. I like that. Would you be able to perform that with Ruby and I? Of course, we'd be happy to. Chomper lifted and hugged them, placing them down to leave and find Ruby. She was by the egg, tending to it, adding fresh grass to it. Ruby! Her head turned toward the sound of Chomper's calls. Ruby! Out from the brush Chomper came, stopping to catch his breath. Chomper, what is the matter? Is something the matter with how out of breath you are? Ruby, will you marry me? Blinking in confusion, Ruby drew back to look him in the eye. Marry? Is that some new type of intimacy you want to try? It usually happens before the mating. It's when a couple, like us, exchange vows in front of our closest friends and family. Since my parents are here, I thought they could perform this marriage thing. Only if you're interested, of course. Oh, Chomper, I'd love to marry you. It sounds like a wonderful tradition. Sharing a tender kiss, the pair went and told the rest of their plan to marry. By late afternoon, they made a clearing the area they'd hold the special union. Strings of flowers crisscrossed overhead. Blooms were collected and set around the area. Ruby and Chomper stood face to face, while Screech, Thud, Rodney, and Trudy witnessed the event. How lovely! Bud said, wiping his eye. Rolling his own, Screech snorted. Seems like a waste to me. They're already sort of mated. Oh, hush, you'll ruin it for the rest of us. Nancy cleared her throat. Dearly beloved, we're gathered here on this special day to unite these two beings in holy matrimony. The couple will share their vows before we finish, Jonathan added, looking at the couple. How can I make you believe how happy I am when you're with me? I cross my heart, I'm telling the truth. A promise is a promise, so I promise you I'll never let go of your hand. I'll always be faithful, I know I can. I'll never stop caring, I'll always be true. I'll forever love you. You make all my fears disappear. I'm braver than I could imagine. You give me courage when all hope is gone. When I'm feeling lost, your love keeps me strong. I'll never let go of your hand. I'll always be faithful, I know I can. I'll never stop caring, I'll always be true. I'll forever love you. Never and forever. We finally know what that means. Stop caring, I'll always be true. I'll forever love you. I'll forever love you. Most, if not all, were teary-eyed. Even Screech had to look away, so no one saw him brush his eyes a few times. Taking hands, Ruby and Chomper took a deep breath, nodding for the older couple to continue. Chomper, do you take Ruby in sickness and in health, through the ups and downs, on the windy path of life? I do, Chomper answered without hesitation. Ruby, do you take Chomper through the good and bad times, together or apart? Will you remain strong on the journey of life? I do, Ruby answered wholeheartedly. Very well. We now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss or nuzzle if you like. Sharing a warm smile, they shared a sweet kiss, gazing lovingly at one another. The vows they made that day both took seriously and knew that no matter what came next, they could weather any storm so long as they faced it together. That night, Chomper and Ruby left the egg with a set of grandparents, heading off to enjoy their alone time as newlyweds. Ruby, would you mind closing your eyes? Chomper was giddy, smiling, and seemed a bit jumpy. Okay. Ruby shut her eyes and listened, hearing movement and wondering what he was up to. Chomper? All right, Ruby. Open them. She smiled and opened her eyes, shocked to see a male fast runner before her. Instinctively, as he came closer to her, she spun and struck him with her tail, sending him to the earth. Once he was down, she pounced and pinned him under her weight, drawing her blade and placing it at his throat. I don't know where you came from, but where is Chomper? Both hands gripped the blade handle, Ruby laying the tip just on his Adam's apple. Ruby, it's me! The male fast runner cried, sounding exactly like Chomper. You, as in you I know you as? Yes, I'm Chomper. He was unmoved, looking up at her at last. Wow, you're even prettier up close. I never got this kind of view from being so tall. For a moment, Ruby didn't know what to do, whether she should stand or remain where she was. Before running him through, she studied him very carefully, realizing it was Chomper, somehow. Scanning his face over, she saw his eyes were red, and he wasn't full fast runner, holding some of his old features that set him apart from her own kind. With a gasp, she released one hand and ran her fingers over his face, hearing him purr deep within his throat, sounding exactly like a Sharptooth. Chomper? He smiled his toothy grin, Ruby knowing in her heart it was Chomper, her beloved Sharptooth. Chomper, it is you! Oh, Ruby, it warms my heart to be close to you, though I could do without the dagger to my chest. His hands rested over her own that clutched the weapon. Ruby threw it aside and grabbed his face, placing her beak to it, kissing him deeply, passionately. Once she pulled away, she gazed down at him. Her wave of joy and excitement melted to worry and guilt. Chomper, you didn't do this for me, did you? No, Ruby, I did it for us. After our wedding, I wanted to make love to you the right way, to be one with you in every possible way. I want that too, for you were the only one I ever thought of when I was alone with my thoughts. I still don't know what that means. It doesn't matter now. Ruby kissed Chomper again, feeling him spin her to be on top. His hands ran down her body, exploring her in his new form. She herself took in every inch of him, unable to believe they were the same size. Not that she didn't enjoy the intimate interactions of the past, but something about being close to him, feeling him take her, make love to her in such a way, made her the happiest fast runner in the world. That night they were one, were officially mated for life. The day came when it was time for the sky beings to leave for their space travels. It was funny how different they all were than when the craft first landed. Chomper, Ruby, and her parents wore mud face markings along with woven covers made from the stinky flowers, carrying several weapons wherever they went. The only ones who didn't look different were Screech and Thud, both unwilling to learn how to wield the weapons, Screech thinking it was beneath him, while Thud politely declined. Chomper stepped forward. Don't be strangers. Come back any time. Chomper hugged them, stepping back for Ruby to embrace them. Yes, thank you for all your help. Your assistance was greatly appreciated. Yes, we'll never be able to return your kindness. Trudy hugged Jonathan, then Nancy. The pair of you were a great gift from above, enlightening us with such useful knowledge. It was nice to meet the parents of Ruby. Jonathan embraced the pair. Thank you. We'll return in no time, especially to see our grandchild. That reminds me, Ruby, Chomper, how would you two like a youngling of your own, one created from the pair of you? Hold on, how is that possible? I understand you creating me, but Ruby and I are completely different beings. What if it's too risky? I mean, the idea of putting something in Ruby that could potentially kill her doesn't seem morally right. Glancing at Ruby with worry, he felt the weight on his heart. But at the end of the day, it's up to her. What do you think, Ruby? Well, the idea sounds nice, but Chomper's right. A Sharptooth is much bigger than a fast runner, though he is closer to our kind than a real Sharptooth. But we're still not the same. Well, that's the good news. All we need is a bit of, how to say it? Basically, the things that make an egg. We'll work on the rest. It may take time, years even. We just wanted to offer something to the both of you. Chomper and Ruby shared a knowing smile and faced the pair. Yes, they answered in unison. Ruby's parents left for their nest, while Ruby and Chomper joined the couple on their ship. Once the sky beings extracted what they required to create life, Ruby and Chomper exited the craft. Goodbye, son. Ruby, Nancy called, waving to them. Chomper and Ruby saw the craft rise, hovering for a moment before zipping off into the night sky. They stood for a while, seeing the light fade, going far into the beyond. Chomper looked at Ruby and the egg she held, seeing her turn and smile at him. It'll be nice to have another youngling someday. To have another one would fill my heart with joy. Yes, being an only child isn't all it's cracked up to be. Ruby nudged him with her hip and nodded for them to head off to their nest. Slowly they took hands and turned their gaze from the night sky. The dot of the ship was no longer visible.